Hello everyone, welcome back to another GIS mathematics lecture video. And in this lecture video I want to work through examples of reduced row echelon form. Okay, so we know how to identify reduced row echelon form once we have it, but how do we take a matrix and actually put it into reduced row echelon form? In the previous video we walked through conceptually the 6 steps, and in this video I want to go through as many examples as we can to sort of get you to the point where you feel comfortable. So let's start with a matrix. -2, -4, -2, -10, 0, 2, 4, 1, 9, -2, 3, 6, 1, 13, -4. So if you run your tests, the tests we talked about, you would see this is clearly not in reduced row echelon form. But let's go about putting it in reduced row echelon form. So the first thing we do is we figure out what row and column to work on. So starting left to right, we figure out the column we haven't worked, the first non-zero column that we haven't already worked on. Well, that's the first column, right? We haven't done anything yet. Then working top to bottom, we figure out what row we haven't done anything to yet, and we hit the first row, right? So this -2 here, right? This is the first element that we're going to work on. So we go to step 2. All right, step 3 is to figure out, okay, well, what do we have to do to make this a 1? Well, to make this a 1, we have to multiply this whole thing by -2. Right, so we're going to multiply, by -1/2. Right, so we're going to do -1/2 times row 1, and we're going to put that value into row 1. But this is just a little bit of convention here. Right, we're going to take R1 multiplied by 1/2, put it into row 1. Right, so if we do that, right, 1/2 times -2 is 1. 1/2 times -1/2 times -4 is 2. -1/2 times -2 is 1. -1/2 times 10 is 5. And -1/2 times 0 is 0. Right? We didn't touch the other rows, so they're still the same. 2, 4, 1, 9, -2, and then 3, 6, 1, 13, -4. Okay? So now we have to say we've got this leading 0. Now we have to make, or leading 1. Now we have to make these 0. Right? So how do we go about doing that? Well, the best way to do this would be to figure out what do I have to multiply this by, so that when we add that to this, we make this a 0. Well, we would multiply this by -2 to make this a 0. So what we do, going to come over here, is we're going to do -2 times row 1 plus row 2, right? Again, because we can add 2 rows together, we can multiply a row by a scalar, and we can add 2 rows together. So I'm just doing these 2 things together, right? And put that into row 2. So what does that look like? Well, -1, or 1 times -2 is -2, plus 2 is 0. So again, we're not touching the first row. So the first row is going to be 1, 2, 1, 5, 0. We're not doing anything to the third row. So 3, 6, 1, 13, negative 4. Right, the second row is what we're working on. So we're multiplying the first row by negative 2, and then we're adding the second row, and we're placing that result into the second row. So 1 times negative 2 is negative 2, plus 2 is 0, so this is going to be a 0. Right, 2 times negative 2 is negative 4, plus 4 is 0, so this is also going to be a 0. Okay. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2, plus 1 is going to be negative 1. Okay. 5 times negative 2 is going to be negative 10, plus 9 is also going to be negative 1. And then 0 times negative 2 is 0, plus negative 2 is going to be negative 2. Okay? All right, so this row right here is negative 2 times row 1 plus what was originally in row 2. I know this is a little confusing. I'm trying to go slow. If you feel like you're getting lost, pause the video, go back, rewatch the step so you can hopefully see where the numbers are coming from and where they're going. Okay. So now let's figure out what we need to do to make this 3 a 0. Well, we can multiply 1 by negative 3 and add it to this row. All right, so we're going to do that. Right, we're going to do negative 3 times row 1 plus row 3, and we're going to put that into row 3. Right, so what does that look like? Well, 1 times negative 3 is negative 3, plus 3 is 0. So we're going to get a 0 there. Again, to be clear, we're not touching row 1 anymore. We're not touching row 2. So we'll have 1, 2, 1, 5, 0, 0, 0, negative 1, negative 1, negative 2, and then we're working on this third row. So 2 times negative 3 is negative 6, plus 6 is also going to be 0. 1 times negative 3 is negative 3, plus 1 is negative 2. Okay. 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. Negative 15 plus 13 is also negative 2. And then finally, 0 times negative 3 is 0, plus negative 4 is negative 4. Okay? So we've done that. We've got a leading 1 with zeros underneath it. Okay, so now we go back and we say, okay, let's find our next column that we haven't worked on. Well, we haven't worked on this. So now let's go ahead and find our first row that we haven't worked on. Well, we haven't worked on this negative 1 here. So how do we make this negative 1 into a leading 1? Well, we multiply by negative 1. Right, so now we're going to take negative 1 times R2, and we're going to stick that into R2, right? This is this idea of multiplying a row by a non-zero scalar. Right, so if we do that, right, we don't touch the first and third row, so we still have 1, 2, 1, 5, 0, and 0, 0, negative 2, negative 2, 4. Right, but if we multiply this row right here by negative 1, we get 0, 0, 1, 1, 2. Okay? So now we need to say, okay, given this row, how do we make this a 0, right? That's the next step. Make everything below the leading one a 0. Well, to make this a 0, right, we would need to add 2 to it. So we would do 2 times row 2 plus row 3, and then we sign that into row 3. Okay, so if we do that, right, we have 1, 2, 1, 5, 0. We have 0, 0, 1, 1, 2. And then 2 times row 2 plus row 3 going into row 3. So 0 times 2 is 0, plus 0 is 0. 0 times 2 is 0, plus 0 is 0. 1 times 2 is 2, plus negative 2 is 0. So now this is also 0. Okay? 1 times 2 is 2, plus negative 2 is 0. So that's going to also be 0. Right? 2 times 2 is 4, plus negative 4 is also going to be 0. So that's 0. Okay? Well, this is all 0, so we no longer have to worry about that row. So now we have to go back and say, given our leading ones, make the numbers above them 0 as well. Well, this is the first row, so there's nothing above it, so we don't have to worry about that. Let me give myself just a little bit more space. So this one we don't have to worry about. This row is all good. Right, our next leading one is here. So we now have to make this above it a 0. So how do we do that? Well, these are the same number. So all we have to do is add negative row 2 to row 1. Okay? So that's going to be negative 1 row 2 plus row 1, and we're going to put that into row 1. Okay? So what is that going to look like? Well, we're not touching our third row. That's still going to be all zeros. We're not doing anything to our second row. Oops. Right, but our first row is becoming negative row 2 times, or negative 1 times row 2 plus row 1. So negative 1 times 0 is 0, plus 1, that maintains a 1. All right, negative 1 times 0 is 0, plus 2, so that stays as 2. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1, plus 1 is 0, so this becomes a 0, so we've accomplished our goal. This now has a 0 above it. Negative 1 times negative 1 is negative 1, plus 5 is 4, so this becomes a 4. And then 2 times negative 1 is negative 2, plus 0 is negative 2. Okay. So now that we've done everything, let's go back and just confirm that what we have is actually in reduced row echelon form. Okay. So the first check, is the first non-zero element in each row a 1? Well, First non-zero element is a 1, check. First non-zero element is a 1, check. This has no non-zero elements, so check. The second is each leading one to the right of the leading one before it. So this one is good. Go down, go to the right, good. There's no leading ones here, so we're good there as well. If there are any zeros, are they on the bottom? Check. And then, does each leading one have all zeros in the column? So this is the first leading one, that column is all zeros. This is the second leading one, that column is all zeros. So this is indeed in reduced row echelon form. I know this was a longer example. Hopefully it makes sense. Hopefully you were able to follow along all of the steps. And as always, if you have any questions, please reach out. Thank you.